As I reflect on that night, the emotions flood back like an overwhelming tide. My son, my only child, was just 5 years old at the time. We had been out visiting a relative, and the evening had stretched longer than expected. The sun had already set, and soon, the darkness of night enveloped us. I remember looking at my watch, noticing that it was already past 10 p.m. The roads, though well-lit, seemed quieter than usual, almost as if the world had slowed down in unison with our tiredness. We were far from home, and the thought of driving back through the deserted roads with a sleepy child filled me with a sense of unease. The heavy traffic had only made matters worse earlier in the day, and now, the thought of pushing through the night made me feel helpless. So, after a brief moment of hesitation, I made a decision, something I had never thought I'd do. I pulled into a nearby hotel. Just for the night, I told myself. As we entered the hotel lobby, my son held my hand, his tiny fingers clutching me tightly. His eyes were half closed, a mixture of exhaustion and curiosity. I smiled at him, trying to mask my own nervousness. The receptionist was kind enough, though we both knew it wasn't the most glamorous of places. It was a small, humble hotel, but at that moment, it felt like a haven, a shelter from the unpredictability of the night. Once we settled into the room, the simple but comforting surroundings made me feel at ease. The bed was soft, and the warm light from the lamp filled the room, casting gentle shadows on the walls. My son quickly jumped onto the bed and curled up, his tiny body already drifting into sleep. I sat beside him, my thoughts racing. There was a strange peace in that moment, even though I knew the world outside was still turning, full of its complexities and uncertainties. It was just me and my boy, trying to make sense of a simple moment, finding a place to rest when everything seemed to be moving too fast. And yet, in that small room, in that small hotel, I felt closer to him than ever. The bond between a mother and her child is so profound. Sometimes it's only in such simple moments of stillness that it becomes clearer. It wasn't the perfect ending to a long day, but it was enough. In the quiet of that hotel room, with my son beside me, I realized that sometimes we find comfort in the most unexpected places. And it was in that moment that I understood, home doesn't always have to be the place where we started, but rather, wherever we are together. Have to be the place where we started, but rather, wherever we are together. The night I will never forget. That night when I made a decision that, though small in the grand scheme of life, felt monumental to me. It was just my son and me. We were alone, our lives entwined by love, hardship, and hope. And yet, the unpredictability of that day, the exhaustion, and the helplessness I felt, none of it could have prepared me for what I was about to do. It had been a long day, a hectic, yet somewhat joyous day. We had gone to visit a relative, someone I hadn't seen in years. The visit had been pleasant, filled with laughter, nostalgia, and some much-needed catching up. My son, of course, was the life of the gathering. His energy was contagious. At just 5 years old, he had that ability to turn the most mundane moments into adventures, simply by being himself. His little face, framed by soft curls, was always full of expression, whether he was making a joke or getting lost in his imagination. But as the day drew to a close, the atmosphere began to change. The sun dipped behind the horizon, and the warm, golden light of the evening was replaced by the cool shadows of night. The guests began to leave, and soon it was just me, my son, and the few relatives who remained behind. My heart sank slightly as I glanced at the clock and saw the time, 9:30 p.m. I had originally planned to leave earlier in the day, but one thing after another had stretched the hours. The road trip had been longer than expected, and the traffic on the way had made us feel like we were trapped in a time loop. I had grown tired, but so had my son. His little eyes began to droop, and he yawned often. He wanted to sleep. I wanted to sleep too. As I looked out of the window, I noticed how the quietness of the evening had settled around us. It was as if the world had drawn a blanket over itself, ready to rest. But something inside me, perhaps a mother's instinct, told me that it wasn't the best idea to drive back home at that hour. We lived a good hour and a half away from my relative's house. My mind flashed with images of the empty roads stretching ahead of us, of the thought of driving with a child who had already had a full day of excitement and now was losing the battle against sleep. The roads weren't exactly safe for late-night driving, either. I wasn't sure what would be more exhausting for him, trying to stay awake or forcing him to sleep in the car. Either way, I knew it wasn't going to end well. For a moment, I sat there, feeling a heavy burden of responsibility. I thought about my choices. Should I continue the drive, despite the risks? Should I push on, driven by the urgency of getting home, of getting back to some sense of normality?